Welcome back, Wellians, and welcome, wanderers of the still currently free internet. This is Zach, and you're listening to Reads on the Bitcoin Well podcast. I recently got myself a Pixel 8 and installed GrapheneOS onto it. If you don't know, this is an open source operating system that overrides the default Android OS and allows you to use your phone without thousands of apps and scrapers and bots pulling all of your data at all hours of the day. This is because, like the crazy person I am, I actually care about my privacy to a degree. I know it may be a lost cause, but I have to do what I can, especially after looking at the news the past week. Over in Europe, a tech founder took the EU's shiny new age verification app, the one built to prove you're old enough to be online, and cracked it in about 2 minutes. So less time than it takes for me to get my coffee ready in the morning. And a few days before that, 1 million passports leaked out of all things, a marijuana club's members portal. Real passports, real people, sitting in a database somebody forgot to lock. But remember everyone, it's all for your online safety, right? Every time a system demands your ID to let you in, it has to store that ID somewhere. And somewhere is always eventually a honeypot. A pile of driver's licenses and face scans just waiting to be breached, subpoenaed, or cracked by a bored founder in 2 minutes flat. Their excuse for protection always becomes the vulnerability. Which brings us to the subject of today's piece. On June 29th, the House passed something called the KIDS Act. And no, it's not the GOAT, the animal, or the acronym. Today's reads is the KIDS Act was never about kids, it's about control. We'll unpack how a bill sold as protecting children quietly builds the machinery to make you prove who you are before you're allowed to speak, read, or exist online. And why that turns out to be the exact same fight as sound money. So let's step out of the noise and confusion of the news cycle and go deep into a topic we all need to be more aware of so that we can push back while we still have the chance. Got thoughts? Email me at z.adair@bitcoinwell.com. That's z.addair@bitcoinwell.com. I read and respond to every email. Without further ado, let's get to it. The KIDS Act was never about kids. It's about control. By Zachary Adair. On the night of June 29, 2026, the House passed the KIDS Act. The press talked about screen time limits and chatbot warnings. Almost nobody talked about the part that matters, the slow, deliberate construction of an internet where the price of admission is your government ID. This is what that actually means and why it should worry you whether you have kids or not. You see, the trick with a law like this is the name. Call it the Kids Internet and Digital Safety Act, put kids in capital letters so the acronym does the lobbying for you. Won't somebody please think about the children? Who wants to be the person on the floor of the House arguing that maybe, just maybe, we should think hard before requiring every American to scan their face or upload a driver's license to get online? You'd be branded a monster before you finished your sentence. That's the genius of it. And it's exactly why you should read the fine print. So what's actually in it? The KIDS Act, H.R. 7757, is not one idea. It's an omnibus, a bundle of more than a dozen bills stitched together, including a rewritten version of the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, the Screen Act, the COPA 2.0, and a new set of data broker rules. It cleared the House on June 29th under what's called suspension of the rules, the fast-track process reserved for things considered uncontroversial. 2/3 majority, limited debate, in and out. Now, before we completely panic, you should know this isn't law yet. It passed one chamber. It still needs the Senate, where it currently looks stuck and then the president's signature. So when you see the KIDS Act passed, hold that thought carefully. The House passed it and the machine is moving, but it's not quite finished. And the gap between passed the House and is the law of the land is exactly where citizens still get a say. Here's the mechanism that should hold your attention, though. Buried in the bill is a liability standard built on the words knows or should have known. A platform is on the hook if it knew or should have known that a user was a minor. Sounds reasonable at first glance, but is it? How does a website know how old you are? It asks. And in a world where guessing wrong means federal liability, no serious company is going to take your word for it. The Electronic Frontier Foundation laid this out plainly in late June. To avoid liability, services will have to figure out which users are teenagers and which aren't, and most won't be able to simply trust what people type into a box. Some will demand a driver's license or a passport. Others will run facial scans through age estimation software. So to verify that kids are kids, the system has to check everyone, including you. As EFF put it, the results is a less private internet for everyone. Defenders have a ready answer, and to be fair to them, it's technically true. The bill text includes an explicit disclaimer that nothing in it should be construed to require age gating or age verification. Senator Marsha Blackburn's office has long held this line. The law does not mandate an ID check. Sponsors aren't lying when they say that. But there's a difference between what a law commands and what a law makes inevitable. Lawyers call it de jure versus de facto. The rest of us call it knowing how the world actually works. You don't need a statute that says, show your papers, if you write the liability rules so that any company refusing to check IDs is gambling its existence in court. The mandate isn't in the text, it's in the incentive. And incentives, not press releases, are what build the world you live in. The ACLU saw it the same way and argued a no vote, warning the bill would push platforms to verify the ages of their users, collecting significant amounts of personal data, and that adults who can't or won't verify might not be able to access those platforms at all. Not the kids, the adults. Anatomy of a safety measure. Murray Rothbard wrote a small, sharp book called Anatomy of the State. His core claim was that the state is not us, not society, not some neutral referee. It's an organization with its own appetite, and that appetite is control. What makes Rothbard worth reading here isn't ideology. It's the pattern he names. The state expands its power most easily when it wraps the expansion in something no one can refuse. Security, order, the general welfare, the children. Almost no one grabs power by announcing that they want power. They announce they want to keep you safe. The surveillance comes packaged as protection, and by the time you notice the surveillance, the protection has become law. Rothbard also did something most people don't know about. He rescued a forgotten 16th century essay by a young Frenchman named Etienne de la Boétie and put it back in front of modern readers. La Boétie asks a question that has never stopped being relevant. Why do millions of people obey a handful of rulers? His answer was unsettling. Tyranny doesn't survive because the tyrant is strong. It survives because we comply. We hand over our own freedom, often willingly, often for reasons that feel sensible in the moment. That's what makes age verification so effective and so dangerous. Nobody is going to kick down your door. You're going to upload the ID yourself. You'll scan your face because the box won't let you through otherwise, and you have things to do. Multiply that by a few 100 million quiet, reasonable acts of compliance, and you've built the most complete identity tracking system in human history, without a single shot fired. La Boétie understood this 450 years ago. The technology just caught up to the insight. And notice who quietly vanishes from this story. The parent. The entire premise of a bill like this is that watching what your kid does online is Washington's job, not yours. Think about how strange that is. We don't ask the federal government to sit at our dinner table or vet our kids' friends or set their bedtime, not yet anyway. Raising children is the oldest and most local responsibility there is. It belongs to the people who actually know the child, which is to say, the parents. But trust parents doesn't grow a federal agency, and it doesn't justify a 115-page bill. So the pitch flips. You can't be trusted to manage your own family, the logic goes, so we'll manage it for you. And here's the part that should bother you no matter where you sit politically. The fix never stays pointed at the kids. To watch the children, they have to watch everyone. Your authority as a parent gets quietly transferred to the state, and in exchange, the whole population gets a little less free. We've watched this happen for a dozen different issues, always with the same opening line about safety. The children are the reason given, but that's just lip service. What you're actually being asked to surrender. Let's be concrete about the three things at stake. First, your right to exist online without showing ID. Age verification sounds narrow, like a bouncer checking a license at one bar. But once knows or should have known is the standard everywhere, the bouncer is at every door. Reading the news, searching a symptom, posting an opinion, the default flips from you're free to look to prove who you are first. Critics have started calling this the identity-gated internet, and the name fits. You don't browse it, you're admitted into it. Second, a surveillance that ties what you say to who you are. To check your age, a platform or a third-party vendor at hire has to collect and store identity data. The Center for Democracy and Technology, writing with the Freedom of the Press Foundation, called these databases what they are: honeypots. Pools of driver's licenses and face scans and real names sitting there. Already, age verification vendors have been breached. And it's not just hackers you have to worry about. As CDT noted, this creates a new pool of data the government can simply demand when it goes looking for who said what. Anonymous speech, the kind the Supreme Court has protected for centuries, the kind that protects whistleblowers and dissidents and ordinary people with unpopular opinions, gets a lot harder when every login is stapled to your legal identity. Third, your access to information itself. When the legal risk of hosting harmful content goes up, platforms don't get more careful. They get more aggressive about deleting. EFF warned the bill pressures platforms to police lawful speech, addiction recovery, mental health, substance abuse discussions, the messy real-world stuff that people actually need to find. The ACLU warned it could sweep up anything, even tangentially related to the listed harms. Overblocking isn't a bug here, it's the rational response to the liability. The comparison nobody in Washington will make out loud. Look at the architecture and tell me it isn't familiar. A social credit system needs three things to function: a verified identity for every person, a persistent record of what each person does, and a way to gate access based on that record. The Kids Act and the wave of age verification laws around it, the UK's Online Safety Act, now live, the Supreme Court's June 2025 decision upholding Texas's ID for content law, and California's device-level age signal law are quietly assembling the first two pillars. Verified identity tied to online activity. Once those exist, the third pillar, gating access by your record, is no longer a technical problem. It's just a policy choice. And policy choices are exactly what shift when the people in charge change. That's the part that should keep you up at night. Not that this administration would build a China-style social credit lockdown. That the infrastructure, once built for the children, sits there waiting for whoever holds power next, and for whatever they decide counts as harmful. You don't get to choose who inherits the surveillance system you help build with your own compliance. Why this is a Bitcoin argument. You might be wondering what any of this has to do with sound money. Well, everything, as it turns out, because it's ultimately the same fight for human freedom. For years, we've watched the financial version of this exact story. You can't open an account without KYC. You can't move your own money without an intermediary who can freeze it, report it, or reverse it. The justification is always protection, always safety, always catching the bad guy. And the result is always the same: a permission system where your access to your own life runs through a gatekeeper who answers to someone other than you. The KIDS Act is KYC for your voice. Where finance demanded you verify your identity to touch your money, this demands you verify your identity to touch information, to speak, or to read. The permissioned internet and the permissioned bank account are branches of the same tree, and the root is the belief that your access to the world should require someone else's permission. Bitcoin's whole reason for existing is the refusal of that premise. No identity check to hold it, no gatekeeper to ask, no central database of who owns what, waiting to be subpoenaed or branched or weaponized when the rules change. It's permissionless by design, which is just a technical way of saying it doesn't care who you are, and no one can revoke your access to it. That's the entire point. La Boétie's insight was that tyranny needs your cooperation. The flip side is the hopeful part. Withdraw the cooperation and the whole thing loses its grip. You don't have to scan your face. You can choose tools and platforms that don't demand it. You can tell your senators, while this bill still sits unsigned, that For the Children is not a blank check for an identity-gated internet. The fight isn't lost. It passed one chamber, and that's a warning, not a verdict. And you can practice sovereignty in the place it's already possible. Money was the first system they tried to make permissioned. Bitcoin was the answer that proved a different design is possible. Access without a gatekeeper, ownership without permission, and a record only you control. Not your keys, not your coins, and now, not your ID, not your internet. The principle doesn't change just because the target moved from your wallet to your voice. The question is the same one it always was. Who holds the keys to your life? You or someone who promises to keep you safe? At Bitcoin Well, we build for the first answer. Self-custody, no permission required, the way it should be.